Hello, my fellow tech rockstars. And by the way, if you have never felt like a rockstar and you're not interested in tech, what the hell are you doing here? Get out. I don't want your money, I don't need your fame. So, I just got back from Japan, where despite the typhoons and earthquakes, we still figured out AI assisted sales strategy with a huge domestic IT service supplier. And actually, I found some of the earthquake tremors quite calming, like a rocking bed helping me to sleep. I gotta tell you, over there in Asia, the hype around AI feels very different. Almost no one in the world understands the actual implications of the current hype cycle. Even the people who try to hop on the bandwagon, or try to get you confused, or try to earn a couple of billions or trillions here and there off of it, they don't necessarily understand the situation either. They just want you confused and ready to pay up. But you gotta understand, they are little worms, little roaches, trying to prey on a bigger thing, trying to get little crumbs of a much bigger pie they cannot comprehend. They just hop in on a train they don't even control. So don't be scared of people like, for example, an employer who says, hey, we're gonna replace you with AI, or God forbid, consultants, or even the people who try to say that we're heading towards a global disaster. Maybe we are, but for different reasons. All of them are trying to play on your nerves, and they're just as confused as you might be. And they will feel real stupid real soon. Maybe just lucky enough to keep some of the money. They find out the hard way. There's a price you have to pay. How do I know? Well, I have dealt with some of them. I assure you, you overestimate them. They are not the big whales they seem to be. You see, I share certain parts of my biography with John Wick. But he is a fictional character, and I am real. And I'm much older than him. In fact, I have a six-figure age. Anyone who thinks this is impossible doesn't know physics, biology, and math. Unfortunately, this is the majority of humanity. If your education is so poor that you don't even entertain this possibility, click off this video right now. So, because of my six-figure age, I am not impressed by any of those fictional metrics like money, fame, and power. These people all ended up dead, while I continued living, and will probably get to 7 or 8-figure age. Now back to the topic. You might have wondered, throughout these 4 years, what the hell is going on with the hyping up of so-called AI. You have listened to the boosters, you have listened to the skeptics, you have even listened to the wise takes of those in the middle. All of the arguments kind of half make sense, or don't make sense at all, and it doesn't really feel right. It feels like something is missing. It feels like everything they say is semi-relevant or not relevant at all. Right or wrong don't matter, as long as you with me, sweet. Alright, so we're not gonna waste this video on the arguments everybody else is already yelling about. All of those things are semi-relevant at best. The real truth hides in a whole different place. So we're not talking about the booster arguments, that AGI is around the corner, AI will solve everything, you're obsolete if you're not using it, the scaling laws that will work forever, AI is the new electricity, all that stuff. Not even about summoning actual intelligence in the form of a silicon and making it our new god. And yes, some people actually believe that, and some of the billionaires believe it too, which says more about them than about AI. It should make you doubt their intelligence, and rightfully so. And not talking about digital immortality either, or the Stargate, or China will win the AI race. The reason that you should panic and invest. Not any of that. We're not talking about the skeptics' arguments that it's just fancy autocomplete, that LLMs hallucinate, you can never trust them with anything real, the financial model not working, inference is subsidized, environmental disaster, or a bubble, or if AI takes jobs, then no one will buy anything, so it all collapses. Nothing of that. Not even the rigged and gamed benchmarks, which is the whole other thing. We're not even talking about the arguments of the insightful middle, like geopolitical takes where someone on Twitter explains the US-China chip war, export controls, TSMC, and rare earth metals like they just cracked the Enigma code. Very serious face, very confident tone, half having the point, half missing it. We'll come back to it later. We're not gonna talk about following the money as well, because money is not the deepest layer. We are getting closer, but there are a lot of traps, the mind traps that you get into as you try to figure it out. So we're not talking about any of that. Not because it's all wrong, some of it might be partially right, but that's all beside the point. If something kind of makes sense but not fully, you need to find the reasons outside of it all. Step outside and see the bigger picture. Now, the actual reason for the stuff that is happening, the core reason, is both very complex to understand and incredibly stupidly simple at the same time. And it's not money, money, money. Okay, if you still live in a framework where money is valuable and billions and trillions mean so much, you are in a trap. Because this is the underlying paradigm that makes you miss the whole point. I'll give you an example. The whole market of uranium on Earth in a year is around $10 billion. Maybe 15 if we count enrichment. Now, let's say you are OpenAI or Anthropic or any other tech bro with billions and billions of dollars. You just got an investment round that dwarfs the entire annual uranium market. We're talking tens of billions in a single round, valuations in the hundreds of billions. You kind of have the money, right? On paper, you could buy several years of world's uranium supply. Let's say you go and try to buy it. Not only does nobody sell it to you, you are actually lucky if you are still alive after asking. So don't ask. If you have been around, at least a little, you actually understand the limitations of money. You have seen the project, or even participated in one, where there was unlimited investment and still nothing came off. Something just didn't click. Either people were not found, or they were not aligned, or it was all too complex, or there was no leader capable of inspiring all these people in order to make the project work. So making things happen is much more complex than money. I hope you understand this. This is about the technology in its broadest sense, the whole chain, including but not limited to social technology. So you remember those geopolitical guys talking about TSMC and Taiwan and the chip war, half having the point, half missing the point. And here's why it misses the point. It's not the fabs themselves. There is such a thing as technological orders. What's that? It's not a gadget. It's not, do you own a factory? I would say it's a whole era of civilization, a cluster of technologies that develop together in sync, plus the way society reorganizes around them. All of the institutions, the economics, how people live and work, this whole package. And we have already been through 5 tech orders. First was textiles, water power, canals, early iron, where the factory age began. The second was coal and steam, railways, machine building, the world getting on trains. The third one was steel and electricity, heavy industry, chemicals, the grid. The fourth was oil and mass production, cars, petrochemicals, aviation, atomic energy, early space, television. And now fifth, microelectronics, semiconductors, computers, software, telecom, the internet. The key factor became the microchip. Everything else sits on top of that. Right now, some would argue we are in technological order number 5++. It's not the sixth one, it's not the new revolution, it's the continuation of the current one. But the semiconductor industry is one of the key pillars for it. Not AI is a separate magic thing, AI is riding on top of this. The backbone is still silicon. And funnily enough, we can have such cheap electronics only because the whole world is the consumer. That's one thing. And another thing is that this whole industry is spread out across the whole world. And it's the only industry where even that serious enemies collaborate, because they are all tied together. It was semi-deliberately designed like that. And today, some think this is its biggest flaw. So in order to create semiconductors, you don't only need a little island of Taiwan and all of the fabs there. You also need ASML from the Netherlands. You also need a hell of a lot of different metals, minerals, neon, and all production technology around them, sourced from a lot of different countries across the whole world. So this is the joint forces of the whole humanity. Now, theoretically, one big country like China or Russia or United States could have localized this end-to-end production of semiconductors at the current level of technology. But it would be orders of magnitude more expensive for the end consumer, which would kill the market. Nobody would be able to buy it. Therefore, it just would not exist. So you remember we were talking about money not being the main thing, but here, in this particular example, it's not really about the money. It's about the amount of labor you need to do in order to afford an iPad, in order to afford an iPhone. If an iPhone costs like a car, you might just not want it. So you gotta understand, semiconductors is the pinnacle of humanity's technology. Because even space tech could and has been localized within large countries. And this thing just cannot, not yet, not at the modern level. And the thing with this semiconductor industry is, it's not only the fabs, not the equipment, not only the raw materials, it's largely specialists and a very complex organization of human interaction throughout this whole chain. This chain is so big that not even a single participant, not even an owner of a big chunk of it, knows the whole chain. It's so big, it's scary to reap links off of it. So everyone looks at it and thinks, tell me, why do you have to go make things so complicated? Yeah, everyone becomes Avril Lavigne for a second. By the way, complicated. If you get overwhelmed at this point, you gotta click off right now. I only want people with enough mental capacity watching this. The others must go. Now I want you to imagine something. For the past 80 years, you have been the big boss of this world. And I'm not talking about you as a country. I'm talking about you as a power structure, not necessarily tied to one flag. You might be a network state that uses several large countries as a parasite. And you control the world's money. All the exchanges were done in your currency, but you were free to print it, because you disconnected it from any actual tangible goods a long time ago. But now you see your globalized world falling apart. Other actors start misbehaving, disrespecting you. People try to get rid of your money. They come up with new ways to exchange value without your supervision and control. And it doesn't happen overnight. You still have power. You still have people using your currency. You still have people depending on you. But they already see the globalized world coming apart. They already see the leader is not as strong as before. They don't have a lagging technology gap anymore. The cutting edge is shared between the major players. And all the previous technological order stuff is pretty well developed inside each major block. I'm talking about 1 to 4. Think of it like a multitude competition. In the past, you won every discipline. Then leaders started to stand out in each discipline. and you lost more and more of the disciplines. Now you watch every major player trying to localize this cutting-edge industry, the pinnacle industry, inside their own zone of control. And you want to do it too, because you see it as a guarantee of leadership in the next phase. You still have a pretty good chance, because you have this half-rotten trick up your sleeve. Your money, 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 you just want to make the world dance, forget about the price tag. But to properly capture this industry and the other technologies you lack, because of the trap you walked into with globalization, you need to understand the whole chain, which nobody yet does, as we discussed before. So you want two things at once. First, you want to capture the most critical links in the chain, the parts that you already see and know that matter. And the second one is you want to stress the chain. You want to find the weak links you don't fully understand yet. Let's use the garden hose analogy. H-O-S-E, not the hose you thought about. To see how a garden hose behaves, where the holes are, you put pressure on it. You watch where the water leaks, where the fountains appear, maybe at which junctions it starts to spray. And to apply pressure, you need overwhelming demand for what this industry produces. You gotta stress it. You gotta see where it crumbles. You gotta see where these little local monopolies in the chain can no longer keep up. For that, you obviously need to print and inject a lot of money, because it's still the medium of exchange between the links. But the real price is not gonna be the money. The real price is either your ability to replicate the whole industry or your ability to capture the complex of specialists, IP, intellectual property, and production facilities. You cannot create that overwhelming demand out of thin air. That would be suspicious. You need a legitimate reason, something magical, something people lose their mind over. They lose control because of it, baby. And here's where it gets almost funny. In this whole situation, it doesn't really matter how capable or useful the technology of pre-trained transformers actually is. It might be useful, it might not be. That's almost beside the point. The main advantage of this technology, and why it was so lucky to come out in 2022 and become famous, is that it is impressive. And when I say impressive, I don't mean it has so much value. I mean it impresses people, literally. It makes their jaw drop, it makes them feel like they're living in the future, and it makes investors, journalists, and ordinary people lose their critical faculties, at least for a while. That's the product. The product is not gonna be intelligence or, God forbid, utility. Just impression. And if you are a frontier AI lab, you are like a painter. You actually think your art means something. You actually think your art is very valuable. And you are so thankful, finally, that you are understood. The world sees your genius. The money are flowing, finally. And you are the prophet of the new age. Obviously, people need your art to be impressive in order to justify the spend. Fair enough. But the spend might be caused by something else entirely. Maybe it's a tax write-off. Maybe it's money L. Maybe it's capital relocation dressed up as innovation. Or strategic demand manufactured for reasons that have nothing to do with your beautiful painting. And you might not even know that as a painter. You just got lucky. You think you are changing the world? Someone upstairs might just need a very expensive, a very convincing receipt. Now back to the semiconductor manufacturing chain. There are many small monopolies there, local to certain links of the chain. This means that you know exactly who to go for if you see the link, once you see the link. So this little monopolist in the chain thinks, this demand is insane, it's unreasonable. Fine, okay. But they still need an explanation for why it's happening. They need a kind of a guarantee that it will last. So they think, okay, the consumer lost his mind. He wants too much RAM. Or the consumer lost his mind. He wants too much GPU, way more than they can use. Okay, the consumer lost his mind, but he still pays. Why not sell? Why not sell? And none of my business if my buyer is crazy, as long as they have the money, right? I hope you see now why most AI skeptic arguments don't matter. It doesn't matter if certain mega cap companies stockpile GPUs they can't plug in because they don't have the energy yet. They are aware of that. They're not dumb. Something still makes them do it. Some companies try to distance themselves from the hype and align with normal business incentives. You can see that a bit with Apple, tiny AI capex compared to the hyperscalers, on device strategy, let others build and burn while Apple owns the interface and devices. So again, companies know, but some higher power makes them act against their business interests. And some try to cover that up with the narrative of a mass AI psychosis, trying to calm you down with this subpar explanation. But none of it matters. Now, if the only reason were to reveal weak points in the production chain, that alone wouldn't justify the scale of what we're seeing. So how does stressing the supply chain help you capture production facilities and specialists? Easy. Producers can't fulfill the demand. They want to expand. They build new fabs on their islands or somewhere else. Building costs money. And there is the only one entity in the world with enough money to lend at this scale. And they will happily lend, because on paper your demand is real. AI is here to stay. And the business case looks perfect. Then the scenarios might differ. For example, we can have an upfront condition. We will lend you money, but you gotta build on a certain territory to get the loan. It's too obvious, too revealing, but still exists. Another one could be no upfront condition. Instead, rely on step 2. Producers take loans, they start building, then the hype stops. Bubble bursts. Demand vanishes. Ideally, when fabs are not built yet, but contracts are signed, debt is committed, but can't be repaid. Okay? Some links in the chain have thin margins. Most of them, actually. It's not like a software industry with huge margins. They have thin margins. And they cannot absorb that financial strain. It may end up in bankruptcy. And the only thing left with value in this business is the facility and the team. So the bank or a strategic buyer can capture the asset and even capture it for cheap. Maybe there will be no press, no drama. A quiet angel acquirer saves you from distress. Management reshuffles, top guys take a hit, with a golden parachute obviously, but the specialists keep working under new ownership. Or ownership stays the same, but now you control the supply chain, understand how it works, and can offer key people relocation to new fabs on your controlled territory. All of this is already happening, slowly under the radar. The major press almost doesn't cover it. That's not their job. Their job is to hype AI, distract you with shiny objects. $1 trillion valuations for companies. They didn't exist 5 years ago. Wow, catchy, all that kind of stuff. But if you look for dry and informational articles with small titles, maybe in trade press, some restructuring filings, you will find it. Some of that is not secret. It's not flashy. And mostly it's happening in a darkened room, beyond reach of God's faith. Now, one more thing. One question for you to think. In this paradigm of manufactured demand, why are certain countries so famous for open source and open weight models that perform almost like flagships but use a fraction of the compute? Do they really hear your soul singing, "I want to break free"? Think about it. Now, the moral of the story is pretty simple. There is a big train, it's going somewhere, only a couple of people know where it actually goes, and whether it will even succeed, because that's not guaranteed either. Then there are a lot of people who think they know where it's going. They try to hop on that train. There are grifters who try to sell tickets without even knowing where it goes. Little worms and roaches trying to do their little things around this big train. And the general public stays worried and confused. It's chaos. But what about you, little darling? What about you? Where are you in that chaos? How does your behavior change once you understand what's going on? What do you do differently? That's the question. That's the question. Use the link in the description, the first one, to answer this question. If your answer shows me you are a real tech rockstar, we will connect. Maybe not on the first video. Maybe you gotta comment on a couple, but we will connect. I need to understand how your mind works. Because I spend my time with rockstars only in our private Hall of Fame. I don't read comments, although if you want to boost it in the algorithm, you can put it in the comment, but I don't care about this video being boosted. I care about this video being shown to the right people. I care about the Hall of Fame. So I don't want you just watching this. I want you to start thinking and strategizing for yourself. You know me by the name Tech Rockstar Style. Until the next one, keep rocking.